Chair now recognizes Ms. Stansbury from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, welcome. And for those of you that have served this great nation, thank you for your service. I very much appreciate it. And I'm especially grateful to have the opportunity today to talk about threats to our democracy, especially from China and our foreign adversaries, because these threats to our democracy and global and domestic security are very real. And America needs to wake up. Because if we do not take action in this chamber, the threats to global and domestic security will have significant and devastating impacts for the United States. And the single largest threat at this very moment right now is members across the aisle this week who are holding up a foreign aid package to Ukraine and Taiwan. Because let me be clear. If we don't support our allies in Europe and then the Pacific, we could be on the verge of a major war in which American service members would be deployed. So we have to get this foreign aid package. Now, I want to be clear about the threats of the Chinese government as it's currently configured. As a member of the Indo-Pacific Task Force, which is a bipartisan task force, I personally traveled to meet with our allies in the Pacific this summer. And I want to tell all of you that the threat is real. Our allies, who thousands of Americans fought for and died for in World War II, are afraid of the Chinese government and the economic and military threat that they pose to their democracies. They are our allies. They are who is helping to uphold democracy in the Pacific. And if we do not take the moment and seize the moment right now to ensure that we are supporting our allies like Taiwan, it could be devastating for peace in the Pacific. In fact, one of my staff who traveled to Taiwan, similar to Representative Krishnamurti, just a few months ago, heard directly from civil society organizations in Taiwan who said in the wake of the invasion by Putin in Ukraine, they had begun doing drills in case of a Chinese invasion in Taiwan. The Chinese are watching what we do right now. And our first and best defense is to support our allies and to root out any activity here in the United States that is undermining our ability to respond to this threat. So while I appreciate that my friends across the aisle are trying to divert from a very real threat, the reality is that we have members, including members who are sitting here in this room today, that are repeating Russian and Chinese disinformation that has been planted in the US media and milieu to undermine our action against our adversaries. In fact, the chairman, the Republican chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, called it out just the last few weeks. He said that members of his own party are repeating disinformation that is undermining action on Ukraine and on US military support to our allies. He said it had infected his party. It was being repeated on the floor of the House. We've seen examples of this, in fact, in both chambers. We have members of both chambers who have been repeating Russian disinformation, as you can see here. And in this very committee, we spent months holding a fake impeachment proceeding based on Russian disinformation that had been planted in the media by a Russian agent. Members in this committee were repeating that information. So if we want to root out threats to American democracy, to global security, we have to wake up. Now, Dr. Snyder, you're a historian. I'm grateful that you're here. Please help us understand the significance of this moment. I'm struck as we are facing, as the leader of the Democratic Party has said, a Churchill versus Chamberlain-like moment. If we do not act on Ukraine, we could see global threats to our peace and democracy.
Number one, and most narrowly, it's impossible to disentangle Chinese and Russian propaganda when Chinese channels transmit Russian memes. Number two, slightly more broadly, the way political warfare works is that things that start in China or Russia end up in our minds and then coming out of our mouths. That's what political warfare is precisely. And then number three, the direct connection between Ukraine and China, which everyone in Taiwan understands and repeats, is that insofar as they resist successfully, the Ukrainians are deterring Chinese offensive operations in the Pacific. And they're deterring them in a way that we cannot deter, because nothing Ukraine does can possibly be understood as provocative by Beijing. They have a power which we don't have, which is to make a war in the Pacific much less likely. If you let the Ukrainians go, we lose many, many things, but also we lose that.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I just want to say history is watching.
Yes, I agree.